Back in January, about 6 months ago, Donald Trump returned to the White House for a second term in office and immediately unleashed economic warfare on China. Tariffs skyrocketed to a crushing 145% on Chinese goods. It hurts, it hurts. That's going to mess up everything, by the way. Imagine if you imported an item that cost $10 and you're going to sell it for a small profit to the end user. And you now have to pay $14.50 to the government, just to get it past customs and border control. You'll go out of business, bro. There's no profit in that. And China sends a lot to the US. So bad news for them, right? The end of the titan of Asia's spectacular economic rise, right? America's just put them in their place, right? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Western economists predicted doom. Financial headlines screamed about China's inevitable collapse, and experts lined up to explain how China's economy would crumble under these unprecedented economic pressures, the Trump tariffs. It's mad pressure, huge tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods, $500 billion, in fact, 500 billion from China straight to America in terms of exports. But here's what actually happened. China just released their latest GDP figures, and they're absolutely stunning, it has to be said. Despite facing the most aggressive tariff assault in modern trade history, China's economy grew in the last quarter to keep it on track for 5% growth overall this year. Side note here, if you check economic reports, it will say China's economy grew 5% in Q1, right? Meaning the first 3 months of the year in quarter one. So here's a mini economics lesson. That doesn't actually mean it's grown a full 5% in 3 months, which would mean that if that same kind of growth carried on in Q2, 3, and 4, then in a single year, you'd have 20% growth. That's not how it works, right? In Q1, 5% metric, the 5% metric in Q1 means, if you come across it in reading, means year-on-year growth, meaning compared to Q1 of last year, and I'm saying Q1 as in quarter one, the first 3 months of the year. If you compare Q1 of this year to Q1 of last year, China has grown 5% year on. So it takes a year to grow 5%. It's it's this point in time last year versus this point in time right now. Not how much have we grown in just these 3 months. Fun fact for you there. As fun as economics can get, at least as I deliver it in my sort of deadpan, unorganized way. Sorry about that. Anyway, all this growth, this isn't just meeting expectations, it's exceeding them, while the entire Western world bet against Chinese resilience. There's been a lot of betting against the global South resilience lately, militarily, economically, Iran, Russia, China, so it is what it is. So how did they pull it off? Beijing unleashed massive stimulus packages first, pivoted their manufacturing towards the high-tech sector that then grew 8.9% in the same period of time in a year. 8.9% is colossal, by the way. That's a huge boost. And the Chinese state, aggressively diversified their export market beyond America. They started doing this when Trump was in office the first time, because you see, when Trump was in office the first time, he also tried some tariff shenanigans, not as bad as this time, but he tried some tariff shenanigans. And after China got hit by that, they were like, oh, this is painful. We need to prepare for this in case another American president or this same guy again next time, he does something like this again. We can't let a lunatic collapse our economy like that, right? This is the Chinese way of thinking. I'm not calling him an actual lunatic. So they actually prepared, right? The Chinese government doesn't use a presidential system that's in out through voting at a nationwide level in the same way as America. Of course, it's not a democracy in that same way. So they can plan, they can prepare long term, and they did. And they prepared, and it was successful. While Trump's tariffs were meant to bring China to its knees, Chinese factories pivoted instead to producing electric vehicles, semiconductors, and industrial robots. Oh, interesting topic we need to get into later. And Chinese exports now focus on the rest of the world, not America. Trade with Canada, Mexico, Europe, Africa, Asia, anything but over-reliance on the US seems to be the name of the game for the Chinese Communist Party. And they seem to have succeeded. The numbers don't lie. Maybe they do, kind of, because that's a whole other kettle of fish where GDP is artificially inflated. But I'll tell you, in China, GDP is artificially inflated. You could say is inflated, but the GDP, the growth and the wealth of the country, by and large, is distributed much more evenly than it is in America. America is a rich country, but the rich are really rich, and the poor are like not dog poor. Dogs aren't really poor, but the poor are poor. I'm talking homeless man in a tent can barely afford a jacket. Poor, like really. There's loads of those in America. Um, so it's just the economic model, right? China uses socialism with Chinese characteristics. We'll get into that in more videos later. Now let's go back to this. China proved that economic warfare can backfire spectacularly because it was actually America that stumbled when Chinese exports were restricted, because China retaliated with restrictions of their own on rare earth element exports, and China refines 80% of the world's rare earth elements. So, you need rare earth elements, which you definitely need for all your electronics. You have to come to China, and China was like, you're gonna slap tariffs on me. Uno reverse card. Xi Jinping drops an Uno reverse card. So that was bad. The US panicked because it caused a stumbling, and potentially, if it went on for long enough, a collapse of the American manufacturing and the high tech electronics industry. And Trump eventually had to strike a deal with China, backpedaling on Trump's own tariffs. It's yet another demonstration, it would seem, of Western powers understanding just one language for sure. And it's not Farsi, it's not Russian, it's not Mandarin, heck, it's not even English or Spanish, right? Or Hebrew, God save us. But the language of strength. The West understands the language of strength. China was singled out for economic bullying, as it reasonably could be framed as, even while I'm trying to maintain my unbiased, impartial status analytically, it was economic bullying. And China stood its ground and hit back. And America backed down. It worked, right? They stood up to the bullying behavior and it paid off. Now, how exactly did China do it? And have they reached a point that would terrify the Western powers, the point of no return, where to stop China's economy, the US would have to destroy its own economy first, essentially meaning China is unstoppable, except militarily. We'll get to that all in a future video. My nose started really itching, so it distracted me. Anyway, for the unbiased news and analysis, without the Western spin, I'm Mahfouz, and I'll see you on the next one.